So we've been thinking about these shifts of maturity. We've talked about a shift from ease to difficulty. We've talked about a shift from self to others. And we talked about a shift from whole, as in it's wholly about me, to part, as in I'm part of something bigger than me. Today we're going to talk about a shift from control to surrender. And I think one of the greatest challenges of being really anyone, but especially a child, is that sense of lack of control. Because kids don't have many things they can control in their lives. So I actually think that we achieve maximum control potential right when we're born. Like as infants, literally everything is about us, right? And we are scheduling grocery trips around nap time, and we're just waking up in the middle of the night whenever you need us. And then everything's kind of downhill from there, right? After infancy, we have less and less and less control over time. This is, I think, particularly challenging, however, for kids, for teenagers, who are in that stage of trying to figure out who they are, and the world is telling them, hey, like you need to have a little more agency, you need to have a little more control in the life around you. So this whole topic reminded me of a TV show in the early 2000s called Malcolm in the Middle. Anybody ever see Malcolm in the Middle? Okay, if you've seen Malcolm in the Middle, you know this is a show about a really, really smart kid who's a middle child. He's the protagonist, and he's in a really dysfunctional family, right? And so just crazy stuff is always happening. And the opening, what would you call it, credits for the show, the theme song, really beautifully capture the tension in which this kid is living, where he's trying to figure out how he can have some control over his crazy life. So I'm going to play for you just the opening credits of Malcolm in the Middle.
Yes, no, maybe, I don't know. Can you repeat the question? You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now, and you're not so big. You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now, and you're not so big. Life is unfair.
Okay, so good. So beyond just the simple song, you're not the boss of me now, you're not so big, life is unfair, all that, those clips they show you really kind of capture that theme throughout the show as well. So you see like little people battling huge monsters, right? Because things are bigger than us that we have to deal with. And at the end, there's that great scene of the boxer hitting the ref, because sometimes it just seems like the world is unfair and we got to take out the guys that are enforcing the rules. Anyway, it's a great encapsulation of, I think, this feeling, boy, like my life is out of my control. I think we've all had this feeling, not just when we're teenagers. I think this is an experience for every adult, for every person at some point in our lives. And I want to pause and say, there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of control, right? Or maybe we should say having some agency. Like having agency is really important. We need to feel like our decisions matter. We need to feel like we can positively impact the world around us. We need to feel like people care about us and what we think. And all of that is important for kids to think and adults to think. But I do believe that this desire to expand our control can become problematic. John Tyson says that in every movie or great story you've ever seen, what distinguishes the hero is that at some point in that story, the hero surrenders their will or their safety or their control for the sake of something bigger than themselves. And in every TV show or movie or book you've ever read, the villain is probably seeking to control other people. Right? Sometimes we control other people just by saying, hey, don't get in my way of my freedom and my autonomy. Sometimes we control other people because we like to boss people around. And this idea that somehow there's something heroic about surrendering and that there's something villainous about trying to control everyone and everything around us, I think is extremely profound. It's really the story of Jesus, right? We said in our prayer of confession this morning when Victoria was leading us that there are these two stories in Scripture. There's the story of Jesus in the wilderness when he's tempted by the devil. And the last temptation is, hey, I will give you all the kingdoms of the world. You can be in absolute control. And Jesus says, that's not what I want. And then we have the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane when the soldiers come to arrest him and his disciples take out their swords and they want to fight to defend him. And he says, guys, I could call up legions of angels if I needed it, but I'm not interested in that kind of battle or reign or control. And he just surrenders to the people that are ultimately going to kill him. Jesus models this idea that maturity and spiritual maturity and wholeness isn't found in control, it's found in surrender. I think this is a particular challenge for us because our culture doesn't think this to be true. Richard Rohr says, much of Western history since the Enlightenment has been committed to throwing out most notions of obedience or training by elders or communal life or hierarchy. They were beneath our dignity. The totally self-determined life became the only life worth living. Nearly the opposite of the entire history of spirituality. One wonders where our assurance about such things has come from. So I want to agree with Richard, and I want to say that the life of spirituality, the life of the Christian, is a life of surrender. It's about saying, I don't need to be in control. I need to give up control for the sake of something larger than myself. So I want to talk this morning about 3 elements of surrender that I think are critical for us as we strive for our spiritual maturity. And the first one is really simple. It's a surrender to Jesus. We've said this before, but I don't love the language. It's not bad, but I don't love the language of I decided for Jesus or I committed to Jesus, because I really think fundamentally, while decision and commitment are a part of a faith choice, fundamentally it's a surrender. Roy Clement says this, right? Fundamentally, I say, hey, Jesus, you are the supreme authority in my life, and I want to give over my life into your hands. So Bruce Larson was a pastor in New York City and tells the story of how he would help people understand this concept of surrendering to Jesus. And so he says when people were on the cusp of that kind of decision, he would walk them out of his church and they'd walk down to Fifth Avenue. And they'd go to the Rockefeller Center. And in front of Rockefeller Center, there's a statue. I got a picture of it. It's a statue of the Titan Atlas holding up the world, right? And he's this bronze, superhuman-looking guy, strapping with muscles and just unbelievably strong. Will you go one more picture for me? And behind him is this massive building, right? This huge edifice that itself is supposed to represent our strength and our ingenuity and what we can accomplish as people. And Larson would say, hey, here's one option, right? You can hold the world on your shoulders. But you look at Atlas, he is struggling, right? Atlas is struggling and straining, and his knees are beginning to buckle. It's a lot for him to handle. Just so happens that across the street from this statue of the Titan Atlas is St. Patrick's Cathedral. It's the largest Gothic cathedral in New York City. And it is a beautiful church. Now, by the way, the church predated the statue, and I think with great intentionality, the statue was placed where it was placed. Now, I think those who put it there wanted to offer an alternative to the Christian story. And what's really interesting is if you're sitting in the pews in St. Patrick's, you can turn around and look out the back doors and see Atlas holding up the world across the street. But if you turn forward in St. Patrick's, you see a really little statue sit at the foot of the cross behind the altar. It's a statue of Jesus at age 8. And if you really get close up, you can see that Jesus is holding something in his hand. Anybody want to guess what he's holding? It's a globe. What's he holding? He's holding the world, right? Larson would say, hey, here's your choice. You can live like Atlas. You can struggle to hold your life together and do it all on your own and put it on your shoulders and just go faster and harder and work longer hours and be convinced that if you do enough, you can keep it all juggled in the air. Or you can say, hey, you know what? There's somebody who can hold all of this effortlessly. There's somebody who can take my life and my world and all the mess that's in it, and they can hold it like it's nothing at all. And that's what it means to surrender our lives to Jesus. It's to say, hey, like I don't want to be in charge of this anymore. I don't want to be the one who has to make all the decisions anymore. I don't want to be the one who's carrying the world or playing God. I want to just let you do it. I want to deny myself and take up my cross and follow Jesus. Ooh, by the way, I think sometimes, thank you, yeah, that's great, they can go away. I think sometimes when we think about this idea of surrendering to Jesus, we get worried about what we're going to lose. I think the fear of any addict is that giving up their drug will change who they are. I think the fear of any person in a dead-end job is that they could leave that job and not find something better or different or life-giving. I think the fear of everyone on the sidelines of life is that getting into the game could be scary or dangerous. And so I just want to say that surrendering to Jesus will change you. Surrendering to Jesus absolutely will change you, but there's something in every one of us that needs to change so that we can be made whole. Surrendering your life to Jesus doesn't make you less yourself. It makes you more into the self that God designed you to be. Confirmands, this is the decision that you guys make today, right? To decide, hey, I want to surrender my life to Jesus. I don't want to carry the world on my shoulders. And maybe there's other folks in this room today that need to think about that decision. You need to think about whether they are believing in Jesus or surrendering to Jesus, because I think they're wildly different things. So the first kind of surrender in the spiritual life is a surrender to Jesus. The second is a surrender to the mind of Jesus. A surrender to the mind of Jesus. And I think this is a step that we really struggle with as Christians. I remember listening to a professor once say that he was at a Bible camp and he was trying to figure out what it meant to like give his life to God. And they were singing this song, I Surrender All. And he just thought maybe if he just kept singing that song like harder and harder, and he had like more and more emotion behind it, eventually like that emotion would win over and he'd have this incredible experience and it would be real for him. And he said, as he grew, he began to realize that surrendering to Jesus isn't primarily an emotional decision. It's a decision to say, hey, I want to surrender to the mind of Jesus. Jesus said, if any wish to come after me, let them deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will save it. The deny yourself is written as though it's a one-time action, like just do it. Like there's a moment where you say, hey, it's not about me anymore, it's about Jesus. And the take up your cross daily is written as though it's a one-time decision every day. I'm going to get up and I'm going to follow Jesus. But the follow me line is an ongoing action. It's something we never stop doing. It's a daily and hourly and minutely and secondly process. And I think fundamentally, this process of following Jesus, of submitting to the mind of Jesus, is as simple as saying, hey, Jesus, I'm going to believe that what you say is good, and what you say is bad. We spend a lot of time talking about tov and ra as a church, right? Tov is the Hebrew word for good, and ra, the Hebrew word for bad or evil. And we know about the tree of the knowledge of tov and ra. We know that in the beginning, the desire for sin starts with wanting to be the one who delineates what's tov and what's ra, what's good and what's bad. And so I think as Christians, we recognize, hey, there are some expectations. Like, I don't earn my salvation, I just surrender to Jesus. But then afterwards, yeah, there's some expectations, there's some rules I have to follow. But I think what we miss, and this is really elementary, but we miss it, is we miss why we follow those rules. So there's a whole list of things that Christians are supposed to not do that many of us think would be really fun to do, right? Things that seem really good that we don't get to do, and it's a bummer. So some things that might be on that list. Sleeping in on Sundays. That sounds really good. We don't get to do it. It's a bummer. Watching unlimited screen time sounds pretty good. We don't get to do it. It's a bummer. I'd love to go on the internet and give people a piece of my mind. I don't get to do that. That's a bummer. There's some things that aren't necessarily on my list, but might be on some people's list. You know what? Many of us have never tried weed. Wouldn't it be interesting? I never get to try weed because I'm a Christian. That's a bummer. There's movies I don't get to watch. There's people against whom I don't get to take revenge. There's folks I don't get to hook up with. There are words I just would like to use the F-bomb once in a while, right? All these things that we think, boy, those seem really, really good, but I don't get to do them because I'm a Christian. And then there's another list. There's a list of things that we do because we think we're supposed to do, but they seem like onerous to us, right? Man, I know I'm supposed to read the Bible, but it's old and it's weird and I'd rather be watching TV. I know I'm supposed to pray, but it's hard and it's awkward and it feels like there's nobody there. I know I'm supposed to give money to the poor or to the church, but I worked really hard for that money. I don't want to give that away. I know I should volunteer to help other people, but I'm just so busy. I know I should be honest all the time, but that's exhausting. And all of this, guys, all of this is about control. It's about who gets to decide what's good and what's bad, what's tov and what's ra. And here's the thing that we miss. We're supposed to not just not do the good things because Jesus says they're bad. We're supposed to believe that they're bad. We're supposed to say, oh, actually, like, as much fun as it would be to yell cuss words as that person who cut me off as they go down, like, I think that would make me less happy. I think that would make me less joyful. I think it would make me more miserable. As much fun as the world tells me it would be to watch those movies or to take vengeance on that person I don't like or to try this drug, whatever, like that's actually not going to lead me to life. It's actually going to make me less happy. Jesus isn't just saying, I don't want you to do good things because I'm a bully. He's saying, these aren't good. And the Christian life is about saying, hey, I'm going to start believing Jesus, that stuff actually isn't good. It will actually make me miserable. And all that stuff on that second list, the stuff that I'm supposed to be doing, that seems so difficult and stressful and hard, like that actually will bring me life and joy and peace and happiness. Like I want to do that stuff not just because Jesus told me to do it, but because I'm convinced it's good for me. So here's my stupid illustration. I need a little audience participation. Raise your hand if you had coffee this morning. Anybody have coffee this morning? Okay, a lot of people. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Now, lower your hand if you put cream or sugar or anything else in your coffee this morning. Okay, so people left, oh, not many of you. You guys are the black coffee people. All right. Now, keep your hand up if you've always had your coffee black. All right, okay, all right, we have a few people. All right, now, keep your hand up if the first time you had black coffee, you were like, this is the best thing I've ever tasted. Nobody? Okay, so here's my idea. I think coffee is an excellent example of the sort of thing that we try and it seems bad, right? I mean, especially black, bitter, hot, yuck, I don't want it, it seems bad. But most of you are pretty convinced it's good, aren't you? And at some point you decided, hey, my initial reaction was this is bad, but this thing is so good. Amanda has a sweatshirt, and it's like the 3 things that matter in kids ministry, and it's Jesus, kids, and coffee. Like those are her 3 things, right? I love it. In the same way, Jesus says, hey, I know your initial reaction is that forgiveness is not fun and vengeance is great. I know your initial reaction is that being patient and kind is awful and just blowing off the handle, it feels really, really good. But trust me, if you lean into what I say is good, you'll discover it's really, really good. You'll discover it's worth it. This is what Paul means when he says, do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. So our first thing is that we surrender our lives to Jesus. And the second thing is we surrender our minds to Jesus. We surrender to the mind of Jesus. And the third thing, maybe the hardest thing in some ways, is that we surrender to the people of Jesus. And this is particularly challenging for us, right? Because we are a culture that's all about individuals. And the idea that we need to, in some way, give up control. Okay, to Jesus, sure, I get it. Okay, to the values and the mind of Jesus, okay, sure, I get it. But to the people of Jesus, I don't even like these people. Like, what are you talking about, Jim? I'm kidding. I like you guys a lot. Todd Bolsinger says it like this. He says, more than any before us, an American today believes that I must write the script of my own life. The thought that such a script must be subordinated to the grand narrative of the Bible is a foreign one. That was our whole message last week. Still more alarming is the idea that this surrender of our personal story to God's story must be mediated by a community of fallen people we frankly don't want getting in our way and meddling with our own hopes and dreams. At one level, we want friendships. At another level, we don't want them. In creation, we were made to live in community, but because of the fall, we tend to run from the very friendships we need. Quite often, our longing for them is tainted by sin. We pursue them only as long as they satisfy our own desires and needs. We have a love-hate relationship with relationships. The challenge of the Christian life is not only do we have to surrender to Jesus and to the mind of Jesus, we have to surrender to the people of Jesus. We can't become who Christ is calling us to be on our own. It takes a village. It takes all of these people together to bring us into the story and the life and the image of Christ. This is what Proverbs is talking about when it says, give instruction to the wise and they will become wiser still. Teach the righteous and they will gain in learning. Fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to advice. A fool despises a parent's instruction, but the one who heeds admonition is prudent. I really like that verse. I'm going to read it again. A fool despises a parent's instruction. We should write that on a wall somewhere. But the one who heeds admonition is prudent. Listen to advice and accept instruction that you may gain wisdom for the future. See, when we surrender control, it's not just about saying, hey, Jesus, we want you to be in charge of our lives. It's not just about saying, hey, Jesus, we want you to decide what's good and not good for us. It's also about saying, hey, Jesus, I want to be part of this kingdom that you've been building with all these people that are in general, just as messed up as I am. And together, I think we become more who you want us to be when we are willing to surrender in the really simple ways of simply saying, hey, teach me. Like, I want to learn from you. Like, I see the way that you love your spouse, and it's amazing, and you've been married for 60 years, and I want to learn from you. Hey, I see the way you've overcome this challenge in your life, and I just want you to show me how you did it. I want to learn from you. Boy, I just need people in my life that say, hey, Jim, you need to be knocked upside the head for a minute. What are you thinking? And I just say, yeah, thank you. Like, I need to learn from you. And this idea that the wise person is looking for elders and other wise people and community and direction so they can develop and grow is so critical to the story of Scripture and to the call of Christ. That listening to someone and letting them teach you is a little form of surrender. It's an acknowledgement that you can improve and should improve and need them to do so. One of the places where I've had just the blessing of great teaching and discipleship has been this thing we've been talking about the last few weeks called the Global Leadership Summit. Over the last 20 years, I think I've been to the Global Leadership Summit 18 years out of 20. And there are all of these teachers there that have so profoundly shaped my life and my leadership and my pastoral ministry and my relationship with Christ. And between those summits and between all of the books those guys wrote and those women wrote that I read, they have changed me profoundly. And it's really an opportunity for me to say, hey, I want to sit at the feet of some wise people and just have them pour into me. I have a little video that is a summary from last year's GLS that I want to share with you.
As leaders, we feel this pressure to often show something that we're really not.
Our highest value at the summit is actually humility. It starts with each and every one of us declaring at the outset that we have so much more to learn about this mysterious, powerful force that we call leadership. And here's what we know.
We trust sometimes globally, but we need to trust contextually.
I believe that going vulnerable and going first to build relationships and community is actually one of the bravest, most visionary acts of leadership that you will ever take.
We are not going to give in, and we're not going to be bitter. We're going to joyfully, lovingly have courage.
Embrace those moments and those failures to make you better.
When you change your relationship with rejection, you change your entire life.
If you want to be successful as a leader, the admission price
is a little bit of failure.
Now is not the time to throw in the towel. Now is not the time to say it's over. You're just getting started. So just keep leading. Just keep leading. And whatever you do, just don't quit.
I love the idea that humility is where leadership begins. I love the idea that failure is the price of leadership. I love the idea that we're the ones who have to step out and start relationships. There are so many places where that summit has blessed me and those leaders have blessed me. I want to say that every Christian needs a community of people around them who challenges them to go deeper, who challenges them to go further in their faith, who challenges them to be the women and men that God designed them to be. And sometimes that's people on a stage. Often it's a lot more personal, right? Often it's like your confirmation mentor and your parents and your teachers in your class who say, hey, we're going to spend a year investing in you and teaching you what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. Sometimes it's a parent or a close friend or a mentor at work. Sometimes it's somebody who loves you enough to tell you things you don't want to hear. Well meant are the wounds a friend inflicts, but profuse are the kisses of an enemy. People that love you enough to say, hey, you need to recognize where you're going wrong, and I'm going to call you back to the path that Christ has for you. This idea of submitting ourselves, of surrendering to a community is so critical. Here's the one key. The one key is we're not called to find some person who's brilliant and wise and surrender to them and have it be like a one-way relationship where they are our master and we are their peon. Instead, the story of Scripture and the vision for the community of Christ is a community of mutual submission. It's a community where everybody, whatever their role, is looking to learn from each other. This is Paul's vision of marriage, right? Paul says, submit yourselves to one another out of reverence for Christ. And so we want to be a place where teachers and preachers and parents and mentors and friends and coworkers and sisters and brothers in Christ surrender to each other and surrender to God. All three of these components of surrender, a surrender to Christ, to the mind of Christ, and to the people of Christ, result in us becoming not less, but more of who God made us to be. Jesus says, for those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will save it. This is the call of the Christian life, to give up control, to embrace surrender, to deny ourselves, take up our crosses daily, and follow Him. Thanks be to God. Amen.